So Caleb Williams has a 28-1 touchdown to interception ratio. Why isn't he getting any more Heisman hype?
You are Locked On Trojans, your daily podcast on the USC Trojans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, fight on, everyone. I am your host, Mark Hulkin, and thank you for making Locked On USC your first listen every day. Whether you're watching on YouTube or wherever you like to download your podcast, as a reminder, we are always free, and I always like to remind everybody, thank you for coming along for the ride. Hope you're enjoying the show. If you are watching on YouTube and you haven't done so already, hit that red subscribe button. It means a lot, and to those of you who have, thank you so much. As again, it means a lot. All right, so I asked the question, why isn't Caleb Williams getting more Heisman love? I mean, 28 touchdowns, 1 interception through 9 games. There has not been another quarterback in the history of the FBS that has gone through their first 9 games with that type of touchdown to interception ratio. Never. 28 touchdowns, 1 interception. Now, a lot of Heisman hype comes from the sports information departments, athletic departments at the universities to kind of get that promotion going, get that hype out there. But let's just be honest about how things have gone so far for Caleb in his first season as USC's starting quarterback. He hasn't had a Heisman moment yet. He has, there's been, they have their marquee game. I guess they've had 2 marquee games. The one on the road at Oregon State. They've been in and out of the top 25. And then we know they lost by 1 point on the road to Utah. Everyone beginning of the year, everyone anticipated that would be the one loss. You would say, all right, if you're going to pick one for sure, it's going to be at Utah. Well, it happened. People were right if they chose that game. But while Caleb had a good game, usually in order to be considered a Heisman moment, you got to win the game. And while he did everything he could, it just wasn't meant to be. Now, with that said, he still has plenty of time this year to have those Heisman moments. I know the comparison is real loose, and so kind of follow along as I go through the story here. But Pete Carroll, he had a year to nurture his 6-6 2001 season into a 2002 Orange Bowl bid with Carson Palmer at quarterback both years. In 2002, when USC went to that season that they earned a bid to the Orange Bowl, Carson Palmer won the Heisman Trophy. USC had 2 losses that year. Right now, USC only has 1 loss that we've already spoken about. So Lincoln Riley has already, he's got to put this USC team and Caleb Williams into, I guess you'd call it a hyperdrive. Last year, everyone knows USC was 4-8, and Lincoln Riley didn't have that honeymoon season to nurture his team and to rebuild the culture and bring in his own players. He did that now. I mean, yeah, he has the advantage of the transfer portal. Pete Carroll didn't have that. And Lincoln Riley also has the advantage of, being a college football head coach and being one of those hot commodities where Pete Carroll was, came in and he begged for the job. So, like I said, it's a loose comparison, but the drawing point I'm trying to connect the dots here is 2002 USC had 2 losses, and Carson Palmer won the Heisman because he had some big moments down the stretch, notably UCLA and Notre Dame. So as of right now, who would you put as the leader as far as the quarterbacks around the country? Who would you put ahead of Caleb Williams as far as the Heisman frontrunner? Um, what about Tennessee's Hendon Hooker? He's had a really good season so far, put up really big numbers. He did up until he played Georgia. So are you going to hold that against him, or does he get to keep that Alabama game in his back pocket and say, hey, you know what? Beat Alabama. Well, so did LSU. And LSU, they are getting better as the season goes along. They've got 2 losses also this year. Uh, what about Ohio State's C.J. Stroud? I mean, he's putting up monster numbers over there in Columbus. Um, and he's done it against what have been were considered good defenses, Iowa, Penn State. Now, notwithstanding, he had a terrible game this past weekend against Northwestern. 10 completions for 25, 26 passing attempts, less than 100 yards through the air. Now, granted, I understand it was the wind was blowing, but still, 10 completions, less than 100 yards. Ouch. But, I would assume he's probably still going to get an invitation to New York. He has a chance to solidify his spot with a big win against, they got a couple more games before Michigan. And then, what about last year's winner, Bryce Young, right? He's done everything possible to help Alabama win this year. And if you look at his numbers, they're probably better than last year's when he won the Heisman. But 2 losses is 2 losses, Tennessee, LSU. Do you hold that against him, though? I mean, Alabama's they're not your typical Nick Saban Alabama team this year, but Bryce Young is doing everything possible. So what about Max Duggan, TCU? I mean, still undefeated, right? We'll see if he's got his Heisman moments with Texas and Baylor. And then there's some dude up in Oregon named Bo Nix. Is he still? I think he's getting more Heisman hype than Caleb has, just because of I don't know. Maybe Oregon's turned on their propaganda machine and forwarded it to Oregon ahead of time. Granted, Oregon had that nice win against UCLA, so maybe Bo Nix has that one up on Caleb. But again, plenty of time for Caleb. UCLA coming up, Notre Dame. He could play against Bo Nix in the conference championship game. You never know. So again, as a reminder, just to kind of close the circle on the story, the year that Carson Palmer won the Heisman in 2002, they went to the Orange Bowl that year. Those 2 losses happened on the road at Washington State, and earlier in the year before that at Kansas State. I believe the Washington State loss was in overtime by a field goal, and the game against Kansas State was BMW. Mike Williams could not catch a cold that day. He had so many drop passes. It was just a really ugly game filled with turnovers. I think USC lost by 6 or 7, something like that. Nevertheless, the way Carson played down the stretch in 2002, putting up big numbers against his biggest rivals, is what got him the attention, got the looks. And USC turned up their propaganda machine, as well as the national media was paying attention. I mean, against UCLA, over 250 yards, 4 touchdowns through the air. And then against Notre Dame, 425 passing yards, which at the time, and I don't think it still is, but at least at the time, was the most ever by a Notre Dame opponent. Carson also had 4 touchdown passes in that game. You might remember him doing some helicoptering in the air, trying to run for touchdowns. I mean, Carson put on a show. People don't remember, or might not remember. Carson was a very athletic guy back in his day before injuries started knocking him down a little bit. So if Caleb puts up those type of big numbers starting Friday against Colorado, and then UCLA and against Notre Dame, and both of those teams are playing well, and they're both going to be nationally ranked. It's just a question of how high when USC plays them. Um, Caleb already has the numbers now for a trip to New York, but if he can build on that, uh, hey, like I said, stats aren't everything. He still has, but he still has time to build the eyeball resume against quality opponents. Whether UCLA, Notre Dame defensively are quality, we know Colorado isn't. They are UCLA and Notre Dame are nationally relevant because of their records and because of their ranking, and that's when you're probably going to see the big push with a Caleb for Heisman campaign. So I'm going to look. Caleb and USC's defense, there's so much more upside despite all the doubters and all the haters that are out there. I'm talking about the defense. So I'm going to talk about USC's defensive upside in the next segment, which is brought to you by Upside, because inflation has us all thinking about different ways to cut back. I only drive when absolutely necessary because gas prices in California are just stupid high. You hear about people talking about prices dropping across the country, not in California. So whether it's driving less, dining out less, or buying less from the grocery store, we can all agree that there's nothing fun about the word less. That's why I started using Upside. Upside is an incredible app for anyone who buys gas, groceries, or dines out. With Upside, I don't have to cut back because I get cash back on every purchase. Now you won't have to cut back because you can earn cash back on essentials like gas, groceries, and dining out like I do. So here's what you do. How to get started. Download the free Upside app, use my promo code LOCKED, and you're going to get $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more. Next, claim an offer for whatever you're buying on Upside, check in at the business, pay as usual with their credit or debit card, and get paid. In comparison to credit card rewards or loyalty programs, you can earn 3 times more cash back with Upside. Upside users are earning more than $1 million every week. That's probably why they have a 4.8 star rating on the App Store. So here's what you do to get started. Download the free Upside app and use promo code LOCKED to get $5 cash back on your first purchase of $10 more. That's $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more using promo code LOCKED. So once again, thank you for making Locked on USC your first listen. But don't forget to make Locked on Sports your second listen today. Games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports. Go beyond the scoreboard and beyond the scenes with local experts and insights Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. So as I was mentioning, to say that USC's defense has been maligned lately, that would be an accurate statement. The fans and the media, yes, I'm looking right at myself. We're quick to point out the Trojans defense. They've been making these games more difficult than they need to be, and I don't think anybody would disagree, including Lincoln Riley, including the players, including Alex Grinch, who's in charge of the defense. Let's just be real, call it for what it is. Earlier in the year, the defense, they were serviceable. They were opportunistic. So they just have to get back to that level. The defense, look, there's still a lot of upside in its immediate future, which is starting this weekend, and as well as for the rest of the regular season, and hopefully into the postseason. Because number one, because we're getting a few players back from injury, but also because recruiting and what's waiting in the wings, on the sidelines, guys who aren't ready now, but are hopefully going to continue to develop. As far as the immediate future is concerned, middle linebacker Eric Gentry will be back soon. Whether that's Colorado soon, I'm not sure, because nobody is sure when it comes to USC injuries. But he will be back for the final 2 regular season games. You can can bet on that. Against Utah, when he hopped back onto the field, um, he showed why he makes a difference just from a leadership standpoint. Um, but his absence on the field is making a big difference too. And it, it's not that so much when he's not even making a play. It's just it's like his length over the middle against in the passing game. Quarterbacks now have to alter their passing, their throwing trajectory because of his length. The seam. It's not like you've got, and this isn't meant to be a put down, but it's not like you have Shane Lee in the middle, who isn't as tall as a 6'6" Eric Gentry. And Eric Gentry has what I call knuckle dragger arms. If you're familiar with snowboarding, those guys drag their knuckles to kind of guide themselves. And Eric Gentry has really long arms. So not only with his height, but with his arm extension, it causes problems for quarterbacks trying to throw over the middle, down the seam, or if he's covering in the flat even. He's proven that he's dangerous playing pass in the pass defense. He's a difference maker. His physicality against the run. So getting Eric back is going to make a difference. Raylan Goforth, he's not going to make any All-American teams, but his return is going to be welcomed. If anything, just to help with the depth of the linebacker spot. You can't ask Shane Lee and Tuasivi Nomura to run 40, 50 plays in the Pac-12, especially against passing offenses. You get worn down. So you need these guys back just to help with rotation, but also because of what they bring to the field. Like I said, what Eric Gentry did against Utah, hopping back on the field, trying to motivate and get those guys fired up, that works right there in the moment. But when he's on the sideline rehabbing, recovering from an injury, those words of encouragement when he's on the bench trying to get his guys fired up, it only goes so far when you're not in uniform. It's a psychological thing for anybody who's played sports. You understand what I'm talking about. You're here, your teammate, and you're trying to, but at the same time, Eric knows that you can only when you can't lead by example. It's not that the words fall on deaf ears. They're not as poignant, I guess. So hopefully the USC opportunistic defense that we saw through the first 6 games is getting ready to come back. We saw last week Kalen Bullock had another interception. What's his 3rd of the year? That's always a good sign. Tooley had a couple of sacks. He now leads the country with 9. I mentioned this on our last episode. But he's also 4th in the nation in tackles for loss. He's just under 2 per game. 1.7, I think, is the official stat. And he should add to those numbers against Colorado, which, the more times you get back there and you're making plays, the more confidence you have. So that'll carry over. And the defense should build off of that as well, right? We talk about momentum and feeding off of each other. So again, as we get the playmakers back and those playmakers start to make plays, hopefully that domino effect in the immediate future starts to pay dividends. So again, and I'm not sure, how much Gentry and Goforth are going to affect the pass defense's productivity, as far as the secondary is concerned. We can get into the, like I said, I started to touch on the nuance and how Eric can affect passing lanes. But just having more speed on the field with Eric and with Raylan also helps the defense immediately. Again, Shane and CV are great physical presences that will lay the hurt on you, but they're not the most fleet of foot. They're just not. Raylan and Eric are quicker. They're not speed merchants by any stretch of the imagination, but they're faster. Another, Colorado is they shouldn't be a challenge offensively for this USC defense. Again, I said shouldn't be because again, Cal shouldn't have been either, and they were. But let's look for some sort of common denominator. Not trying to lay all the blame at the feet of attrition and injuries. Nevertheless, you got to take that into consideration. No, UCLA and Notre Dame, again, two more reasons why USC's defense could hopefully start to look better. Those two teams love to run the ball. And while, USC hasn't been great against the run, they're better against the run than they are against the pass. So if they can focus on stopping what UCLA and Notre Dame want to do, hopefully that'll take some of the pressure off the pass defense as well. Because again, as I mentioned lately, USC's been getting hurt more through the air than they are against the run. As far as the future down the road is concerned, you got Zion Branch who's waiting in the wings to play. He's ready to play. I mean, I don't know if anybody's aware of this, and I probably should have put this in one of my notes and observations reports. He suits up to play every game, every home game. He's in uniform. For him, it's a psychological thing, how he gets involved in the game, even though he's not going to play or can't play this year. But anybody who's seen film clips of Zion Branch in high school and who've seen him up close and personal this year, he's college ready, and he's a difference maker, and he will play a lot. And who knows, he might even play this postseason, depending on if he's medically cleared, because it won't affect his red shirt. Damani Jackson, cornerback. Will he be healthy? And he should be healthy next year. We all hope. Is he going to be back this year? I don't know. Again, we get such minimal information when it comes to injury report, and we see even less during practice. We only hope that Damani can start contributing again this year. The few times that we have seen him, both in run support and in the passing game, he shows that he's ready to play. He can make it happen at this level. The moment's not too big for him. Again, it's a young secondary. Sia Wright will be a year older, hopefully, bigger, stronger. Kalen Bullock, Max Williams, Jalen Smith, they'll all be back, older, wiser. And then, the transfer portal is a great place to, pull another Mekhi Blackman if Lincoln Riley thinks that's necessary for the defense. So I said at the beginning of the year, serviceable was the goal for this USC defense. And they've slipped below that. They just need to get back to that. The offense is going to score points. They just need to get back to, getting those takeaways, getting those big plays, when in the moment, in the red zone, forcing field goals instead of allowing touchdowns in the fourth quarter, if you're going to allow points to be scored at all. I just think the attrition caught up, and we all knew that this season USC had zero margin for when it came to depth, especially on defense. So now they're getting back some of those pieces. Like I mentioned, Gentry, Goforth should both be back. Should be back this week. I'll be shocked if they're not back by UCLA. Literally shocked. And now the defense, they get to kind of focus in on the prize. It's out there in front of them. They know it. UCLA, Notre Dame. They can't look past Colorado. But look, hope isn't a strategy. But the upside is, again, Gentry's coming back, and his on-the-field leadership means a lot more than his inspirational hopping onto the field, trying to fire up his team in the moment. So you can bet on that. And then you can head on over to betonline.net. They're your number one source for betting football and the start of the new basketball season. You can find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth analysis on every game. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sports wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. The fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including MMA, boxing, and golf. So head to the website today or use your mobile device. BetOnline, where the game starts. So if you want a sure thing to bet on, look, bet on USC to beat Colorado. I am telling you right now, I'm not sure about the whole point spreads thing. I think it was 31, 34. Head on over to betonline.net. Check it out. You tell me. I'm not a huge gambler, and I never bet on USC because my heart's involved way too more than my head is. So that's how I balance it out. Don't bet on USC, Mark. Never. Unless it's a sure thing. This might be the game that if I had some spare money laying around, I might do it. I don't, so I won't. But here's some numbers for you wager-friendly people out there. It's going to be a beatdown. USC first of all, take this. USC leads the all-time series versus Colorado, 15-0. Colorado's record in Los Angeles is 0-7. Last year, when USC was terrible, USC won on the road 37-14. So Colorado wasn't as terrible as they are this year. And USC is much, very, very, very much better than they were last year. Emphasis, 3 varies. Caleb Williams and this offense should tear Ralphie a new one. I mean, shave the fur off the back, send them home, embarrassed, tail between their legs type of a loss. I mean, so far this season, Colorado has 4 games where they've lost by 30 points or more. I hate to say it, but if USC doesn't win by 30 or more, maybe that's why they opened as such a big favorite, betting-wise. I won't consider it a loss. But, you've got to set a standard. And if you want to be considered a legitimate playoff contender, I know most people are thinking USC doesn't belong in the playoffs. If they're playing a team like Georgia, you're right. But you gotta be teams that you're supposed to beat big time because that's what the playoff committee is looking for. And USC is going to need a lot of help to get to that number 4 spot in the playoff selection. Again, they don't have to get to the number 1 spot. The number 4 spot is the goal this year, and they need some help. Teams will lose in front of them, and if USC does their part, it sets up perfectly for them. I mean, Oregon is number 6, and if USC plays Oregon in the conference championship game, and let's say Oregon moves up to the number 4, number 5 by the time that game rolls around, USC is obviously going to move up as well. I'm just saying. It doesn't mean they're going to win a playoff game. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that they could beat an Alabama. So that on the last episode. But that's a different argument altogether than what we're talking about right now. So beat Colorado by 30 plus, and then let's talk about beating UCLA, talk about beating Notre Dame, ranked teams, and we'll start exploring the future more. So until then, we're at the end of the episode already. There you go, man. Time just rolls by when I'm babbling. Hopefully you're enjoying it, though. And we will have another episode of Locked on USC because we come at you 5 times a week. And when you're not watching or listening here, and you're not checking out the Locked on Sports today, you're heading on over to wearesc.com. So until then, everyone, you know what to do.